Hey, I'm Mel.
Hey, I'm Mol.
Welcome to the Podyssey.
With the GlioBabes.
2 girls.
2 brain tumours.
What could possibly go wrong?
Well, I'm really hoping nothing, because today is potentially the biggest, most groundbreaking, and if any podcast episode is going to go down in history, it'll be this one. So we got to get it right.
Hello and welcome back to the GlioBabes podcast. Today, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Scott Arthur, the MP for Edinburgh South West, and more importantly, the MP who introduced the Rare Cancers Bill, which is now known as the Rare Cancers Act. Scott, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast today.
Thank you. It's great to be here, actually. Very excited.
The whole community, your name has become quite big, and it probably will be forever, because you've really done something big when things have been stagnant for quite some time, which we'll go into. But what was it that made you care about rare cancers in the first place and want to take this on?
Well, first of all, I mean, I'm always very happy to take credit for getting the act across the line. But of course, it was a real team activity, which had so many people. I mean, thousands and thousands of people helped get it across the line by sending emails, pestering their MP to support it. So I'm always happy to take credit, but I do feel slightly guilty in doing so, because it's been a team effort and it wouldn't have happened otherwise. So yesterday, my wife was actually up visiting her mum, because tomorrow is the 8th anniversary of him dying from a brain tumour. And at that time, I didn't really know how rare brain tumours are, even though I think we all know someone that's had one, and also how deadly they were. I just thought that my wife and her family were really unlucky. And it wasn't until I became an MP that I grew to understand really the scale of the challenge facing a lot of people when they get a brain tumour. And so then, by chance, I managed to win the private members bill lottery, and it is literally a lottery. The ping pong balls are pulled out of a goldfish bowl with numbers on them, which gave me the chance to introduce my own piece of legislation to Parliament. And I decided, originally the plan was to focus purely on glioblastoma, which I expect people listening to this will know is a type of brain tumour. But through advice from clerks in the House of Commons, they pointed out that as the bill continued its passage through Parliament, it could get narrower, but it could never get broader. So glioblastoma felt quite narrow, so it suggested we broadened it out into brain tumours, but then we broadened it out to all rare cancers. And I think whilst that was just an impulsive decision that we never really thought too much about, I think it's been incredibly important in terms of securing the passage of the bill, because it's enabled to build that really broad coalition of, I think, over 40 charities, including the Brain Tumour charity, which I know you're both really well connected with, in getting this across the line. So yeah, that's the story. And it's been amazing, and it's been humbling, actually, the whole thing. And the law is still new, it's still quite fresh. The ink is still quite wet on the vellum, if they still write all the laws onto vellum in Parliament. I'm sure they do. But I really look forward to starting to feel the impact of it. I look forward to the first person contacting me to say it's made a difference to their lives or lives of someone they love. And I'm getting quite emotional even just thinking about that just now. So yeah, hopefully soon.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Scott. And before becoming an MP, what did you understand about brain tumours, and what kind of surprised you about them once you started to get closer to the issue?
To be honest, I didn't know too much. My lovely wife used to work in Western General Hospital in Edinburgh in the neurosciences ward there. This is over 20 years ago now. And in that ward, they did have people recovering from operations where often brain tumours had been removed. And she would always come home and tell the story, and the brain tumour was always compared to the size of a fruit, which I used to always kind of question and sometimes joke about why do we do this? But I guess one of the things I do know now is that implying it's the size of a fruit implies it's a discrete object which is nicely nestled in the brain tissue, but we know often that's just not the case, and that's actually one of the challenges when it comes to operating on them and makes them so difficult to remove. And I think what I didn't appreciate was just how deadly some of them are. You know, glioblastoma, which my father-in-law had, survival rates for that at 5 years are very, very slim indeed. And so I just didn't really understand these things and just how bad and how serious it is when you get a diagnosis with a brain tumour, because there's been so little progress in the field. I think as somebody who was just busy getting on with their lives, I just assumed that there was lots of research happening. These conditions were survivable, as so many cancers are these days. But we know that's just not the case for so many patients.
We often hear statistics, don't we? Like you said, the 5-year survival rate for glioblastoma is 5%. We know it's about 12.9% in England, not UK, for over 5 years for those high-grade brain tumours. And we know that statistics are a bit all over the place, but behind those terrifying statistics our people, our families, our stories, and there are so many guests that we've had on that share what that looks like for them as a person, because we are just ordinary people getting on with our lives, and then we're hit with this thing often out of the blue, and things happen very quickly. So for those that kind of like wrote into their MP, that were part, like you said, the thousands that were part of making this change, how does that lived experience actually help shape those decisions in Parliament?
I think it's incredibly important. On a really basic level, it gives MPs who want to be engaged in this subject something to talk about when they're giving speeches and they're trying to make the case for change. And it also convinces MPs who maybe haven't thought too much about the subject, because there is so many subjects that we're asked to advocate on. It gets them thinking about, well, what can I do to help this person? And I think most MPs, no matter what party they're in, are there to help their constituents. So I think people raising local issues with their MP, I would hope that every MP would engage with that. And it's as an MP, you do get lobbied quite a bit. And my staff know is that when we filter through the lobbying emails we get on all sorts of subjects, everything from electrical vehicles through to brain tumours, I say look for local connections, and because that's the stuff we want me to focus on, because we can't do everything. And so when you've got a local person telling you an incredibly personal story, and as an MP, you've got a chance to, firstly, give that person a voice in Parliament by talking about what their, if I can use the word journey, has been like, and really make the case for change. That's incredibly powerful. And it's one of the best things, actually, about the Rare Cancers Act, is that in the two main sessions we had in the House of Commons and the sessions we had in the House of Lords, those two key sessions, uh, so many charities had their type of cancer mentioned for the first time ever, or have had more mentions in 2 years than they've had in 20 years. And for so many people who are suffering with these conditions, like one of the ones we work quite close with is a type of cancer called sarcoma, where, it's a really difficult condition where there's just not treatments at all. Just to hear people talking about the condition, the need to improve outcomes is incredible for them. Really, really incredible. And one of the people I met in this journey was a mum who lost her daughter to her sarcoma. She'd actually come to Edinburgh because her daughter had lived in Edinburgh for a while, and she was there to scatter her daughter's ashes in a public park. But she made time to come home to my surgery to talk about her experience and how she hoped in the future for another mum they would lead to a different outcome. And I think that's really, really, really powerful. And I think MPs do have a chance to shape that. And I think, and I'm sure they do and will engage with residents on this particular issue. So I'm getting emotional talking about this. Maybe it's, I must be tired, it's Friday. But there's nothing wrong with being emotional, is there?
No, not at all. Especially on this podcast, there's always room for being emotional. So talking more about the Rare Cancers Bill, Scott, in terms of how this bill will sit and will help people, and obviously now it's the Rare Cancers Act. What would this actually change for someone, or how would this help someone that's, say, diagnosed tomorrow or diagnosed next week? Say, like how can people expect this to help them? I guess if they receive a diagnosis.
So maybe not tomorrow, but soon. Well, just now, just today, we know that for so many people with a rare cancer diagnosis, their only hope is a drug trial of a new innovative treatment, which might make a difference for them. And for so many people, they find it really difficult to find those trials taking place anywhere near them. And they end up Googling, they end up speaking to their GPs, speaking to their consultants, and often it's a dead end. And one of the things that will happen soon, hopefully, certainly the Department of Health and Social Care put this in their press release, so it better happen, is that you get a rare cancer diagnosis and the trial becomes available for you. You won't have to Google, you won't have to speak to your GP. You'll just get a notification on your NHS app that says the trial is available for you, and you'll just have to click on a button to say you want to take part. And I think, based on what I've heard from other patients, I think that is absolutely incredible that people have that opportunity. So that's what we should see soon, is that people be able to access trials using the NHS app. And behind that is something really important, because what's going to happen is somebody with a rare cancer diagnosis, when they get that, unless they opt out, they'll automatically go in a database of people available for trials. And pharmaceutical companies are absolutely desperate for people to come on their trials, but finding them can be difficult. And so that database is incredibly important to them. And we also expect all pharmaceutical companies to put I say expect, it is the law. I was going to say it's going to be the law. It is the law. We changed the law. All their trials will have to go into a single database. And so what's happened behind the scenes with that app is it's joining together those two databases so people can find each other and hopefully start to make a difference. I was speaking to a pharmaceutical company just last week, and they were saying that when a commercial operation, they were saying that when they run trials, often their company is running trials across Europe, and they're just trying to find patients as quickly as possible. And in the UK, it can be slow to find patients. So hopefully these changes will make that a bit quicker, and it means that we'll get patients on those trials and we'll consume all the places. They were saying that quite often patients in Spain, for some reason, seem to get on these trials first and they consume the places. So let's beat Spain in that league table and start taking those places and getting patients from the UK access to those trials and all sorts of other treatments. And then the thing which we'll see soon as well from the Act is to all this research that's happening across the UK, and there's an amazing stuff happening. I've been guilty of saying there's not enough happening, and of course there's not, but there's amazing stuff happening across the UK. Amazing people, including constituents, who are working on cures for brain tumours. Really, really, really impressive work. One of my constituents is a part of a project that's raised about £70 million for glioblastoma treatment, which is absolutely, absolutely incredible. But there's a feeling that the research isn't being coordinated properly. So the Act demands that the government appoints someone to coordinate that research. And we've just been speaking to the Department of Health and Social Care this week about the job specification for that. And that should get advertised before the summer, we're told. Had to Google. The summer starts on the 21st of June. It's going to be advertised, and we're going to, hopefully that person is going to come into post really quickly. They're going to develop a strategy. There are lots of KPIs. We like KPIs. And then we could start looking at the difference that person is making in terms of getting people in the UK to work together to bid for money, both inside the UK, but drawing money from outside the UK into the UK as well. Because the thing I'm never ashamed of, obviously I'm in this to improve outcomes for patients, obviously extend lives, save lives, improve quality lives. But the other benefit we get from doing all this is it brings more investment to the UK, and it brings more jobs to the UK. And those jobs are really, really well paid jobs, because this is a high demand sector. So we should never be ashamed of saying that's a benefit of what the Act will do as well. So saving lives and also bringing that investment into the UK and building up our expertise in this area generally it's all good. It's all good. And one of the things that really frustrates me is I think Cancer Research UK, who do amazing work in this space, their visa costs each year is £400,000 to bring the very best researchers from around the world into the UK to do the research to help save British lives, and they're paying £400,000 on visa costs. I think that's completely unacceptable, and I have raised that in the House of Commons. I raised lots of things in the House of Commons, I have to say, but that's one of the things that's on the list. So there you go.
Thank you for explaining that in depth and kind of breaking it down, because there's been so much news and, social media, the charities have been sharing it, but some of it can be really difficult to understand if you've been thrown in this position. Mel, on a previous episode, said that we had to become part-time neurologists to understand what these phrases meant and this kind of sphere that you're put into. And then, of course, the politics and policy side of things that if you're not used to, then again, some of that language can feel quite difficult. So that was really helpful. Thank you. But on you've touched upon it slightly, so it feels quite good to go into. On the side of accountability then with this, we know brain tumours have historically been underfunded, and we saw the pledge after the death of Dame Tessa Jowell, the 40 million in 5 years pledge after her death in 2018, which wasn't fulfilled. Why do you think it's taken so long for action into this cancer to happen compared to others, looking at brain tumours specifically now?
Yeah, I mean, on the Tessa Jowell money, I mean, what a complete disgrace that that money wasn't spent and they weren't coming back and asking for more. I mean, I was going to say it's infuriating, but I've been in rooms where this is discussed and people have been infuriated and tempers have been raised because it seems absolutely unbelievable that that's happened. And now, but one of the reasons is that we don't have the capacity in the UK to deliver some of this research. And so if that's the case, what we should have done was used that money to generate that capacity by getting people in the UK to do PhDs, using it to attract experts from around the world into the UK to work here. Just saying the money's still there and is unspent, I think, is unacceptable. And I think it's good. I think we heard a few months ago that the government was going to look at this and actually make stuff happen. And I think the last I heard that was starting to happen, but let's not count our chickens, etc. So yeah, it is incredibly important. The real challenge is that, you know, I meet lots of charities who are in the cancer space, and you know, we've got the 40 supporting the act, and I meet charities outside this space. Every single one of them wants more money. There's none that comes along and says, Scott, we've got too much money. How do we give it back to the government? How do we give it back to the people who are donating to us? That is just not happening. So there is, so that, and I think that's why it's really important that the government does have to think about, is it got the balance right? Bearing in mind that brain tumours are often conditions which affect younger people who have many productive years ahead of them. They might have their own young families. And so losing someone either through ill health or, you know, really bad health or perhaps even death has a real, let's not be ashamed of this, a real economic impact. And so I think we have to think about whether or not we've got the balance right with this. Another thing is we have to think about whether or not we're doing enough to maximise the investment from the private sector into this space to help boost the money that's coming from donations through fantastic charities from the government. But let's see if we can boost that using private sector money. And the simple thing I was talking earlier about doing all we can to make sure trials here can be set up as easily as possible. That's going to draw more money into the UK and make things happen quicker as well. One of the other actions in the Act is to get the government to look right around the world to see what they're doing in this space to track research into rare cancers, to figure out, based on what's happening already, what works and what doesn't. So rather than trying to reinvent the wheel or keep on doing the same old thing, actually establish what best practice is. And that report will get tabled before Parliament. And I'm sure myself, along with others, will be demanding that the government implements any recommendations that are in it as well. So let's hope that starts to make a difference too, in terms of the amount of money. We know that in the USA, you get tax breaks if you want to do research in rare cancers. We tried to do that as part of the development of this act, but it was difficult because our main liaison point was with the Department of Health and Social Care, and tax breaks would have meant involving the Treasury, and there just wasn't the time to do that. But you know, if a company is doing research overseas and comes to the UK, cutting their tax bill doesn't cost the taxpayer a penny because they were never going to be here anyway. So we should be doing things like that to get more capacity in the UK, more research and more results, hopefully.
So in terms of awareness, you know, we talk about on this podcast a lot, you know, awareness isn't just a single day, it isn't just a single month. You know, we know March is Brain Tumour Awareness Month, and, you know, there's Go Grey in May for brain tumour awareness and everything else. But how do we make sure that that conversation stays at the forefront of people's minds? And, you know, how do we make sure that we still talk about the fact that we've gone from the Rare Cancers Bill and it's now in legislation as an act? How do we make sure that that conversation stays at the forefront of people's minds?
Yeah, so I was actually writing on my social media page yesterday about awareness of intolerance in the UK, you know, bigotry, let's call it bigotry rather than intolerance, in the UK, and how recent surveys have showed that more and more people are aware of the issue. And I think for that issue, and also, the need for people to be more aware of the challenges in the rare cancer space, awareness is just the start. We can all be aware of problems, is being willing to come together and act on it, which is really, really important. And so obviously the Act, and we've also got the cancer plan together with that. The Act is within the cancer plan. There's a real opportunity there. The stupidest thing that Wes ever did was publish the cancer plan on World Cancer Day, because it means that every year when World Cancer Day comes around, we think, wait a minute, it's the anniversary of the cancer plan. I wonder what they've done over the past year. Let's ask them. So it means that every year that anniversary is in our minds, and we're going to be tracking it, and we're going to be asking them what's happening in that past year. And the good thing about the plan, although it perhaps needs a bit more funding, is that it has dates in it, both for my act and for the other actions in it. And let's hold the government to account on that. Let's not just be aware that, going back to that awareness word, let's not just be aware that those timelines exist. Let's demand that they are met, or perhaps even delivered faster than expected, which is not an unreasonable thing to ask for, is it?
So all of this is amazing and sounds great. But to the people that write to their MPs, to people like us, how do we hold our MPs accountable, including you? How can your constituents hold you accountable in this? What do we do? What's your piece of advice for that?
Like I said, I mean, I think all MPs are in this job. I mean, I disagree with lots of MPs on political points, but I think the vast majority, let's say all of them, they're in it for the right reasons, and they're in it to serve the local constituents. So if you're writing to your MP on this issue, I would hope that they do reply and engage with you. But the more people write, the better. I mean, so many campaigns run, they get all their people to write to us at the same time, and we think it's a big issue, and you're much more likely to engage on that. And likewise, I go to my surgeries. Recent surgery, I had a campaign group come along to speak about the climate emergency, because they wanted me and the government to take that more seriously. So there's lots of things you can do, but don't be afraid of asking to meet them or write to them. And if you write to them, expect an answer. I'm in my office just now. I mean, one of the great things about being an MP is that without even asking for it, the government gives you money for people to come along and help you do your job, people to help you read your emails and help you understand what the key themes are coming through. And so any MP that doesn't reply to their constituents on any issue, but on this issue in particular, should be ashamed of themselves, because they've got the resources to do it. And if they can't manage staff to read their emails for them, why are the MPs? Hopefully I'm not in trouble for saying that, but I think that's an unreasonable thing to say.
No, thank you for being honest with that as well. And we always talk about advocacy and awareness within this space, but young people are often told that they're inspiring, when they're going through something, and it's always like, oh, you're so inspiring and things like that. But sometimes when that kind of you get labelled as that, you're not always taken seriously. And how can we shift that in politics? I've been in touch with my local MP and he's been great and things like that, but sometimes people might reach out and then again hear nothing back or not be taken seriously in what they're asking for. How can we shift that in the political space?
So we do. We have been thinking about this, how we engage with young people, and let's not get in the trap of defining what a young person is. But we have been thinking about this quite a bit, actually, because obviously we do work whenever I get invited along to local schools, I go along, and it's always interesting. We actually did a survey of people in my constituency who are between 16 and 18 to ask them about what issues were important to them. So in Scotland, you can vote when you're 16. That's when voting age starts. So it was really just to understand, that's for council and Scottish Government elections, but they can't vote in general elections, but that's going to happen soon. I think right across the UK, people who are 60 and over will be able to vote. And so I don't doubt that in response to that, the parties might think about what's our offering to that age group. So we do try to engage. So we issued that survey to try to understand what was important to those young people. And one of the most depressing things about that, actually, is I think I'm right in saying is the most important thing that was fed back was the cost of living crisis. And I guess I was hopeful that young people that weren't really feeling the impact of the cost of living crisis, but of course it's unavoidable. The other thing we're doing is to try to give young people a voice. I went on TikTok, but I think that's just embarrassing. The real thing we're doing is we now run an internship program for people who are between 16 and 18, so they can apply to come along and work for us. I say work, we don't pay them. Work for us for 1 week. So it's kind of like a work experience week, I should call it, rather than work. And so as part of that, we're going to get them in here. They could think about if they want to run a local campaign for that week. And then we'll get them into the council offices to see how the council works, a bit of local democracy there. And then also hopefully we'll get them into London so they can come into Parliament. And so to get the train down, we're really lucky in Lumo, which is one of the train companies, has offered to provide them tickets to come down. And we're still thinking about what we're going to do with them when they're in Parliament, but hopefully they'll get to sit in the chamber. Hopefully, if the stars align, there might be a speech that I can give that day that maybe they've been involved in writing. So there's lots of things we can do that's not just kind of patronising them by setting up a TikTok account and me doing young people's things, which would be excruciating. But so we're trying to engage with them in a constructive way, but it's not easy. I mean, like I say, I know that we've had 16 to 18-year-olds who've had to vote for some time in Scotland, and as someone who campaigns politically, engaging with that age group isn't always easy because they're not always interested. But maybe that's because political parties aren't giving them something interesting to think about. Because it'd be really patronising just to assume that young people are only interested in, I think quite often the assumption is the climate emergency, but I think there's more dimensions to them than that. Right now in Scotland, they're really interested in social media bans and smartphone bans. When you go to schools, that's what they want to talk about because they feel that coming towards them or perhaps their younger brothers and sisters.
Thank you so much, Scott. We really wanted to put that one in because we know that we have some excellent listeners, but as young people impacted and meeting as young ambassadors, and with brain tumours being the biggest cancer killer of children and adults under 40, which we know that under the age of 50 are classed as young. According at the moment, this is 2026. If someone's listening to this in the future and it's changed, but that's when we're seen as young. So thank you.
Just one last point on that. When we interviewed the young people for the Work Experience Week, I mean, I was a bit nervous about doing it because I thought, how would we pitch the level of this interview right for a young person? But in fact, it may have just been the people who applied, because I'm sure only fantastic people would apply for Work Experience Week, work with me. But they were all excellent, and quite quickly I could see that for all of them, I could speak to them as equals. It wasn't that I had to talk down to them or patronise them or anything. They were able just to talk about, obviously they're interested in politics, public affairs and Edinburgh and things and the world around them. But I was able to treat them and speak to them as an equal. There was no talking down. So I'm really optimistic about what we can achieve with them in that week. And I really hope that can help them in the longer term, as they try to get to university or into work, the fact that they've worked here for a week and the experience that's given them.
That's great. And hopefully there's more opportunities for people across the UK with their MPs to do that. That would be really awesome. And to put you in a bit of a difficult spot now, if one of those young people came to you and was diagnosed with a brain tumour today, what would you say to them?
I guess I would ask them to listen to your podcast. There you go. That's a good answer. But the thing is, I mean, one of the worst things about the experience of taking through the act, it is getting to know just how bad the prognosis could be. And I was watching the Channel 4 programme, was it Stand Up to Cancer?
Yeah.
Where they have often they tell these stories about people who are facing cancer. And I was watching with my wife one night, and I find myself, when I recognise the name of a cancer and I can remember what the survival rates is, I can find myself getting quite depressed, because despite the unbelievable optimism sometimes of people with these conditions, it's horrendous. It's absolutely horrendous. But I guess, I mean, what would I say to a young person who has that diagnosis? Just that, value what's around you. I mean, 10 years ago, my life was saved by the NHS, and that really got me to think about what's important to me and I can join every day. But the thing that's really changed me this year is in January, I was out speaking to a constituent, and the constituent, I was maybe being a bit miserable, as I can often be, and the constituent told me that I had a moral duty to be optimistic in life. And it was the phrase moral duty that meant it stuck with me. And I have to say, that stuck with me, and it's May now. That's just a long time for a New Year. It was a slightly late New Year's resolution, and it stuck with me, and it has made me feel. I don't know if it's changed things around me, but just reminding myself whenever I'm faced with a situation to feel optimistic about it. It's made a big difference. It's made a big difference. But we can't pretend these diagnoses are easy, can we?
No, not at all. But thank you so much for coming on to the podcast, Scott, and sharing your side of things as an MP and as a person that clearly can change and shape the legislation for people like us. We really appreciate your time for coming on to the podcast today.
And I hope this is just a start. I mean, what the Act has done is it's got a group of charities together. People in those charities now know each other better than they did previously. They're now, I had a meeting yesterday with the Less Survivable Cancers Task Force, talking about how they can build on what's in the bill and how they can start to make a difference. Next week, believe it or not, is the next private member bill's ballot for MPs to introduce their own legislation to Parliament, and I'll be entering that again. But what I would say to people on the podcast is that look out for which MPs come in the top 7, because that's the most important slots, but all of them are important, the top 7 in particular. And if one of them is your MP, contact them and ask them if they're doing something about improving treatment or improving outcomes for cancer patients. And if they are, wouldn't that be amazing? And wouldn't it be amazing that 1 out of those 7, again, decided to do work in the cancer space, no matter what that is? It might be about a new treatment or just improving the support for people to make it a legal obligation for that to be in place for people. Like care rather than treatment, things like that. So look out for those 7 names. If you want to lobby MPs, those 7 MPs will be the most important MPs, apart from the ones who think they want to be Prime Minister, but let's not get into the news just now. They'll be the most important 7 MPs for a wee while. And can I make one last political point, if that's all right? And it's kind of a political point, is that for so many of those private members' bills, I predict what will happen is they'll have really good ideas and they'll build up a campaign around them. But then a minister will contact them and say, well, we want you to withdraw your bill. And what we want you to do, if you do that, what we'll do is we'll promise we'll do something for you, but we won't make it law, but we'll make a difference for you. And what happened in my session is a lot of those MPs accepted that offer, and sometimes it did make a difference. But we always hung on saying we wanted it to become law because we know that when the minister changes, perhaps that promise might change as well, but the law doesn't change. And I don't know when this is going out, but yesterday Wes Streeton resigned, and the other person who's big support to me was Ashley Dalton. She had to resign a month or 2 ago. And the other person who was a big help was Andrew Gwynn, and he had to resign. He's now no longer even an MP now. So all those people who were so supportive and, promised the earth to me and delivered, they're no longer in power. So, but I've got the law that's still there, and it doesn't matter who's the health secretary next, that will be implemented. And I think and as much as I'm sad to see Wes go, I think there's real power in the fact that the Act is going to stay, just like the cancer plan will stay as well, and we'll get it all delivered and hopefully make a difference to people's lives. I better stop talking now because otherwise something awful is going to happen.
I feel like we've had a bit of an insight into Parliament the last few minutes, but an insight into everything. So Scott, thank you so much. To anyone listening today, we know that even in the moments where we're smiling and laughing, this is a very difficult topic. So in the show notes, you will find the support services to the incredible charities and emergency services. Please do reach out to support. We will make sure that links to Scott's page, including TikTok, will be in the show notes, so you can go and follow along. And also you can find the GlioBabes on Instagram at the GlioBabes, at TikTok as well at the.GlioBabes. And we've now just joined LinkedIn, the GlioBabes podcast. And you can find the podcast all 7 seasons, 7 past seasons. We're now on season 8 on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and guests, amazing guests like Scott, you can also see on YouTube. So please go check those out. And we've done it.
Thank you so much, Scott. We really appreciate you coming on today.
This is good. It's not quite the end of my week, but it's been a good step towards 5 o'clock on Friday. So thank you. Have a great weekend.